What's going on, guys? This is Damian from The Lookout, and today we're talking about the worst color in Dragon Ball Super card game, green. But before we begin, hit that like and subscribe button. We are on our way to 500 subscribers when we're gonna have an awesome giveaway. With that being said, roll the video. To understand the problems of green, we need to look at the history of green. We're going to evaluate green starting from set 10 onwards. We are entering set 17 right now, and we won't be counting anything before set 10 because it's not relevant anymore. Green got its building blocks for the future for the Unison Warrior format in set 10. Much like other colors, it got its staple counterplay, counter-attack. It had a pretty good Goku leader, and that's pretty much it. It had the Migra Unison, it had Bardock Unison, Blue Impulse, the Vegeta. There was a lot of things, but there was nothing super concrete to judge its future on. It was just like building blocks for things to come. And things came in a very strong way. Set 11 Vermilion Bloodline was the last time that green was actually relevant. It got two powerful leaders in Gotenks, which was a meta-defining deck at the time. Gotenks was insane when it came out, and it had Majin Vegeta, which saw play. Well, it saw a lot of play even last year at Card Market's Best of One events. This was the last time that green was relevant, and everything started slowly going downhill with the next set. Set 13 was when green started becoming weird. We got Turles, and Turles was a very good deck. Turles topped some events. And we got Lord Slug, which was more of a foreshadowing for green's future, because Lord Slug was this first in Unison Warrior block archetype that was just weird, and Bandai just took this and ran with it into the next set. Set 13, last time it was set 12, I was wrong, sorry. Set 13 brought the best green leader into the game, King Gold. And when I say the best green leader, I think I think we can be pretty much that all of us can agree that King Gold is currently the best green leader because it's the only one that saw literally any relevant success consistently ever since it was introduced. We also got Chilled, which we don't talk about Chilled, but unfortunately it looks like Bandai decided to adopt Chilled's philosophy of, hey, let's make bad green weird archetypes instead of running with success that was King Gold. And this brings us into Unison Warrior Boost, where things just went from bad to worse. Set 14 was when things went off the rails. We got Videl, which was interesting, but amounted to absolutely nothing, never won anything important. And we got Majin Buu, and every time at least one person manages from time to time to top an event with one Majin Buu, which is very impressive, but the deck was still awful. The deck never accomplished anything. So yeah, we got a very good secret rare, and that's it. We got this weird experiment with Broly and Broly Field card to try to push Broly BR with King Gold that was abandoned, and that was it. But not even this could prepare us for the atrocity that came out in the following set. So far, ever since set 11, we always got two green leaders where one was either good or okay-ish, but amounted to nothing with the exception of King Gold, and the other one was just bad. In set 14, both of them were awful. These are probably the worst leaders ever created. Vegeta is even worse than Chilled. Vegeta does literally nothing. Your opponent can deny you the ability to draw cards with your leader. That's how bad Vegeta was. Goku more suffered from both bad card design and half-assed design. Like, there was no reason for Goku's field card not to have barrier. Like King Gold's Dynasty, it was so important for it to have barrier, for it not to be removed, but it never got it. And the other cards were just awful. Unfortunately, things didn't get any better in the following set. Realm of the Gods, the last set, the current set that we are in right now, gave us Beerus and Champa, and neither of them did anything. they were once again this like weird green experiment. Like, okay, let's try, to replicate some seasons of Dragon Ball Super anime, but no, it just didn't do anything. They start with 4 and 5 life to reflect the number of fighters that they had in that season of the anime, and they didn't pretty much do anything. They relied on their weird gimmick too much, and yeah, people just ended up playing King Cold instead. Which brings us to the upcoming set 17. This leads us to set 17, and we're still getting spoilers, and at this point in time, we didn't get spoilers for green, but we saw enough of it to judge it. We saw that one leader will be Metacooler, and it will be gimmick Metacooler Swarm, basically, green-yellow. Okay, fine. Every green set had like this one leader, which was like, okay, like this is very weird, except set 15. But the other cooler, the only thing that we saw is this: 3 unisons, most likely with Empower on each of them. But that's it. This is enough to tell you that once again we are looking at a green archetype that is completely locked. Probably doesn't have a generic leader, because you get 3 unisons, your leader is probably going to completely revolve around them. And once again, we are stuck with what's most likely just going to be bad. Despite what I just said, I don't want to sound like a doomsayer, I don't want to spread doom and gloom all around, but if everything from set 11 onwards, especially the last couple of sets, is any ground to judge things on, then I'm afraid that we won't see any improvement in set 18 as well, mostly because these sets are created months in advance. Now let us summarize the problems, and then we can come up with suggestions. The first problem with green is the size of its engines. Unlike any other color, green has massive engines, so you need like 20 cards for your decks to do anything, because they are so archetype locked. It is impossible to create like a good generic green deck. It is impossible to find enough space for all non-archetype locked generic cards in your deck without going above 50 cards per deck. The second issue with green is its over-reliance on replicating scenes from the anime or the movies to a point where flavor is detrimental to mechanics. Every color in every set strives to replicate some event in the series, but all of them are mostly to some point open-ended. Green is doing everything that it can to replicate it as close as possible. For example, there was no reason for Beerus and Champa to start at 5 or 4 life, and for them to have like this weird field card, battle cards. They fight, and when one KOs the other, it goes under the field, and if you like knock out all of your opponent's warriors, you win. No, there was no reason to do this. There was no reason to go so flavor focused to a point where it's detrimental, but they still did it. Because Beerus had 4 fighters in the anime and Champa had 5, so now if you're playing Beerus you start with 4 life, and if you're playing Champa you start with 5. It's detrimental to the color. Now one can argue and say like, well Damien, every color does that, so why is green different? Perfect example is Red Jiren from set 14. Red Jiren is a flavor win. It really shows like his growth from childhood, 1 drop, up until his ultimate form, which is 8 drop, and it still perfectly replicates that feeling of tournament of power in the anime. But then they didn't go all in, they didn't give Jiren a massive engine where you just cannot put anything else in there. If it went all in, it could have said, hey, you need to have an X amount of Universe 11 cards because Jiren was the last one standing before you can actually like attack or play Jiren 8 drop or something. That is something that green does. So Champa and Beerus and Goku are the perfect example of like how not to do it. Jiren is an amazing example of how you should do it. And the last problem is that green doesn't have a generic leader, or a leader with an engine small enough for green to put in good generic cards. Everything green nowadays has to be leader locked, engine locked, that's it. It's very difficult to play an actually generic green deck, or at least one with an engine small enough for it to be open-ended. It doesn't need to be, a complete replica of the anime or something, but you can still replicate it like you did with Jiren, but in a smaller package. Green needs this potential to play its generic stronger cards and not overly rely on closed engines. Ironically, the closest thing to what I would imagine a generic green leader is King Gold, which is a deck with a massive engine, but it does what you want to do with green, which is probably why it is so successful, because it consistently can remove your opponent's cards, it can remove markers from unison, it can floodgate, negate, it can discard if you take some discards into it. It's basically like a Soul Striker for green. It's not, because you cannot use any of these cards anywhere else, but King Gold is basically a good example of, okay, maybe this is what a green leader should be, just not archetype locked behind 20 cards. Now that we have summarized all of these problems, let's make some suggestions for solutions. Solution number 1, stop relying on massive engines. I've already said this in the video, but there is no reason for green to have such massive engines. In every set, every color has 2 archetypes. Each archetype has its own engine, but no archetype has such a massive engine as a single one for green. Green's engines are huge, and you cannot just pick and choose remove aspects of them. You need to run like almost the entire engine for the deck to work, which leaves very little room for anything generic or anything outside of the archetype to enter the deck. Solution number 2. Stop overly relying on having to replicate scenes from the franchise and start putting emphasis on the game mechanics. For example, Jiren, as I said, is a perfect example of this, but let's look at Beerus. You could have made Beerus start at 8 life. Instead, you could have kept everything else and just made Beerus and Champa start at 8. And then instead of starting at 4 or 5, that is when they awaken. They awaken when they hit the number of fighters that they had at the start of the tournament in the anime. That's it. Everything else can stay. So, by doing this, have you made the deck any better? Well, yeah, you've made the deck better. The leader doesn't even need to be 15k. It can be 10k, starts at 8, and you can keep the entire rest of the engine there, and it will be dramatically better than the one that starts at 4 or at 5. My last solution is give us good generic leaders and or generic cards. I would prefer a generic green leader because we need something that isn't archetype locked. When everything is archetype locked to a degree that green is, it has the positive of it becomes easier to learn and easier to collect for new players. That's okay. But unfortunately, if one key piece like the leader is bad, everything else falls apart. If the engine is massive but it's lacking a key piece, but you don't have any place to put it, then the deck falls apart, unless you want to go above 50 cards, which is detrimental in some cases. So don't be afraid of giving us at least one generic green leader, or just give us one leader with a smaller engine and give us over the course of 2 or 3 sets, hopefully 2 plus tournament packs, give us some generic green support so that we can customize green decks the way that it fits us. before I conclude the video, I just want to address the possible counter-argument, which is, well, Damien, then we would basically have Soul Striker. Do you want green to become blue, where you have only one leader that is so better than everything else and nothing else is play? And to that I can only answer you with 2 words: King Cold. King Cold is what Soul Striker is to blue, except that it's not generic, but it's so vastly better than anything else that came out ever since King Cold came out, that nothing else in greens is play anyway. So would the game look that much different if we had a green generic leader similar to Soul Striker? Well, honestly, as I've just said, we already are in that situation. Well, that's it for me. These are my problems and my suggestions for solutions, so let me know. Do you agree? Have I presented a solid case for green's troubles? What do you think? Are you a green player? Are you experiencing the same issues with green that I'm experiencing? Or maybe you're in a complete disagreement with me. Let me know in the comments below. I read every comment. I love reading them. I love answering to them. And don't forget to subscribe if you like this video. We are on our way to 500 subscribers when we're going to have a really awesome giveaway. This has been Damien from The Lookout, and I will see you guys in the next video.